Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Stan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, look, it's a real pleasure. I mean, this is a panel of real experts and people that I know and respect well, and I'm really happy you could share your thoughts and your insights today. For some of us, it's good morning, some of it's good afternoon, some of it's good evening, but this is a global audience that are going to be watching this. So I really appreciate you taking the time, and I think that the industry is going to appreciate what you have to say today. Knowing you all, I'm quite sure it's going to be an interesting dialogue. But first of all, let me set the stage a little bit. If ever there was a case for a moderator to stand aside, it's with this panel. We have suppliers who are all experts, Kale, Champ, IBS in the IT form. We have an airport that's the largest in the world as far as transactions and passage and cargo. That's Atlanta with Elliott here. And we have Swissport, who is, from what I've seen in the past, taking some leading edge steps towards things in the warehouse and also with technology. And I witnessed one of their offices in Amsterdam in a control room environment, which I'd never seen in a GHA before. So I'm really looking forward, Hendrik, to you sharing some of your experiences of how we can bring this industry up and get to the next step. That said, we have to address adoption of these systems and this technology globally, or it's not going to work. We need to look at these things because of compliance. There's a lot of it's going to be pushed down to you from governments, and we've heard about that from Courtney at ICAO in his keynote speech. That governments like the UN, for example, representing various states, are now saying that digitization is top of mind. Why? Cybersecurity, but also safety and security in aviation, both on the ground and in the air. On the ground, we don't want people to be hurt, obviously, but in the air, we know the risks that are there. Things like e-commerce are putting stresses on the industry they've never seen before. So, and that also goes for handling, Hendrik. I mean, if we're moving away from build up pallets to many small shipments, we can't behave the way we did in the past. Paperless, according to a major integrator in a speech, actually a contribution to a webinar last week with ICAO, he said that he can't see digitization moving fast unless the states get involved, because most service providers are reluctant because governments don't trust digitization. I'd be anxious to hear what you have to say about that. How can we make governments trust what we're putting in a digital environment? We're looking at cargo community systems because it's for the greater good, but we're also facing silo approaches to proprietary data systems and thinking that we have a unique selling point, and we're not embracing the cargo community systems in some places. Elliott, maybe you could share with us later some of your experiences with that. Messaging, how can the IT companies and the trade industry, like the journals, get the information out there now that if we don't cooperate as a community, especially in this aspect, we're going to fall way behind. So looking forward to all that, sort of setting the stage, I'd like to introduce each one of you to our audience with sort of a brief bio, and then we'll get right into it and hopefully get some interaction between you. Don't look to me always to stimulate it. If you have a question for someone else on the panel, direct it there. I'd really like that to happen. So digital and automation developments to improve efficiency is the theme of the talk. And first one I want to introduce is Elliott Paige. Elliott is the airport director, air service at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. That's a hard one to say. ATL, Atlanta. We all know and love Atlanta. He started his career in international public policy and business strategy. Then he joined Hartsfield, bringing more of that global experience into Hartsfield, which really benefits, of course, in attracting international companies to come to the airport. He's working on treaties at the multilateral level in the past, which helped him in pivotal international organizations. He's worked with the World Trade Organization, United Nations International Trade Center, With all of that experience, Elliott, we're going to be looking to you for your background, not just in airport, but what you know with the WTO, which is extremely interesting for everybody. Then we'll talk to Hendrik Leyssens. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Hendrik is Vice President Global Operations at Swissport. Hendrik is appointed Global Operations Head in 2018. He's in 2012, when he joined Swissport, following an acquisition, he was in charge of rebranding of the cargo activity. So he's been involved in cargo for quite a while. After holding several management positions in Swissport, he joined the Swissport headquarters in Switzerland, Zurich. I've been there many times, where he was responsible for the setting up of the Global Operations Key Account Management Program as well. So you've had a lot of interface with airlines, and you know their thinking. So I'm great to hear that. Amar is the CEO of Kale Logistics. He has over 20 years of experience. Even though he still looks young, I don't understand why you don't have gray hair like me with 20 years in this business. I had gray hairs after about 2. So his consulting experience is in supply chain and technological industries. He is appointed as the domain controller of cross-border domain at the United Nations, which is CFACT, which is very much involved right now with ICAO as well. And he's on the panel of trade facilitation experts at the UNECE, United Nations Economic Commission of Europe. So government, that's what we're hearing is going to be pushing a lot of what we're talking about today. So your insight into that would help as well. He's on the executive committee of the International Port Community Systems Association, intermodality and digitization, and that might come up as well. Radhesh Menon, Vice President, Head of Strategy and Product Management, Cargo and Logistics at IBS Software. IBS is a very well-known and respected company in the IT field. They've been involved in cargo for many years that I've had experience with. Radhesh is a Head of Product Management and Strategy for IBS for the offerings in the Air Cargo Solutions line of business. So welcome, Radhesh. 16 years of experience in air cargo and logistics is quite a long experience, and especially now. And previously, Radhesh held business process and IT consulting with several leading air carriers, which is important because he can bring that point of view. Qantas, Nippon Cargo Airlines, Austrian and South African Airways, among others. So Radhesh, thank you. And last is Fred, last but not least, and maybe best, who knows? Fred's career in transport IT spans over 40 years, with the last 20 years solely focused on delivering solutions in the air cargo industry. So a depth of industry experience, and also you can historically know the pain we've been through trying to get where we are, because like you, Fred, I've been around forever. He's held various leadership positions with CHAMP and its parent company, CETA, with responsibilities for cargo, and in his present role as CHAMP's Head of Commercial Operations for the Americas, Fred is responsible for customer engagement and sales. So we have a great panel. I rushed through that because I really want to get to the dialogue between you. And what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is throw a few questions to the whole panel before I get maybe specific with each or any of you individually. So, look, we've been talking about e-airway bills, and that really disappoints me in the industry because, and I know I was there, I hate to admit it, but in 1988, we actually transmitted the first e-airway bill in Canada, 1988. And today we're talking about such a success of having people like sending e-airway bills. It makes me gag sometimes, really, honestly. So what initiatives such as e-freight, which is more important, single window, one record, and the various cargo community digitalization projects towards paperless, progressing and contributing to lowering costs, impacting environmental sustainability issues, which is dear to my heart, improving data accuracy, speed, and process of improving efficiency. How are these initiatives going? I mean, this is sort of talked about by the industry. It's something on top of mind, and some people think that's all we're doing, which I think the governments are going to show soon that that's not it. But could I throw this question, say perhaps to Fred? Maybe you and I have the most history on this panel. How are things like e-freight, the single window, one record, how is it going and why is it taking so long?
Well, I think I can think back to many years, maybe not 1988 where you sent the first message, but I can certainly believe that because it was shortly after that where IATA initiated a program to create cargo community systems in different parts of the world, and that was in the early 1990s. And that's kind of when things took off as far as EDI goes. But, you know, we've been doing that now for, well, ever since then. The messages have grown a little bit, but really haven't matured much. The whole concept of e-freight, I can remember when all of that started. So we've been talking about this for an awful long time. And it seems to come up frequently. You know, the question comes up, how are we doing? Where are we going? And how's the industry adopting it? It's been slow and painful. And, you know, I think we still have a long way to go, unfortunately. But I think every time there's an advancement in technology and where an airline takes a new system or a ground handling system comes about, new features are always added that always take data quality into account, number one. But, you know, we're still very much a message-based industry. And I think, you know, we need to get past that too. So e-freight may have been the beginning where it talked about improving the quality of messages. You know, there was even the program to measure the quality. So I think that's come a long way. And I think we're probably nearly there in that sense. But now that more technology is coming into the industry, more data needs to be captured as well. So we're you know, we can't stop with e-freight for sure. We need to keep moving on and expanding the data set.
Well, one question then, you know, before I start picking on Elliott and Hendrik and saying, why aren't you doing more of this? I'm going to pick on the people who actually can make it possible. Radhesh, Amar, you have anything to say about what Fred just commented on? Because, you know, my experience is, and, you know, I've run a few airlines in my life. My experience is they keep saying, you know, who's going to pay for this? Well, quite frankly, it's peanuts. If you talk about the total thing. Number two, why is that an issue when you're trying to put these systems into clients? And the second issue they keep saying is, I have my own system. I don't want to cooperate with the community. Well, that doesn't help an airport. So Amar, Radhesh, could you comment on what Fred just said and maybe give us some life experiences in tackling that issue? Or are you to blame? Because you're selling your system and saying, if you use our system, you'll be better than the next guy. So can I blame you for all this? Or do you have a defense where you'll turn around and say, no, we're there for the community as well? And you can see where this is going, Hendrik and Elliott, right? Because I'm going to come back at you afterwards.
Okay, Sir, I mean, maybe I'll go first. I think the first thing is that, as you rightly pointed out, the technology, the underlying technology for this has been there forever, right? We all know this. It's no rocket science. I think fundamentally, the whole thing boils down to motivation, right? Is the motivation right? Are your objectives right? What do you want to achieve out of eAviable? Like, you know, nobody does it just for the leaderboards. Of course, I know certain companies that actually put this up as a marketing thing to say we are, you know, compliant and whatever. But I think fundamentally it comes down to how do you think about the end benefit, right? We have had some of our customers actually convert eAviable as a framework into something that delivers tangible business value. Meaning you convert that into a business process that actually creates value for you in terms of, for example, being more efficient at your counters, in you know, dealing with your customer service. Do a lot of left shift of operations to say, how much can you actually do pre-arrival? And do a lot of data checks and things like that before you arrive at the terminal, so that at the end of the day, everybody benefits, right? The less time that somebody spends at the terminal, it's best for the terminal as well as for the forwarders, as well as for the customers. And also it translates to other things that you can do. For example, can you channelize a lot of your resources who are manning desks today to doing other stuff like inside the warehouse or moving freight and things like that. So I think companies who have had that vision to convert that behavioral framework into something tangible and of value have actually gone forward and done it. And I think that motivation most of the time is missing, or that clarity, I think, is missing. Because once you get down to doing it and you design your processes in that manner, I think the technology and the backward integration in terms of EDI, messaging, data, those things exist. And if it doesn't exist, there are ways to create it.
Well, Amar, before you start, I mean, the theme of this whole talk today is developments to improve efficiency. So efficiency seems to dictate to me that you would want the whole community to be talking to you, because if somebody like American Airlines brings a shipment in and they want to move it on a truck, well, you want that trucking community to be in the system as well, because you can't just depend on American Airlines to tell you that every trucking company that may serve the airport works, right? So Amar, what about the efficiency that can be gained from data systems? Safety and security, I mentioned before, from ICAO is a priority. Safety and security is also economic, meaning protect people's lives, but also ensure that the people can do their job. So where is your drive towards promoting the efficiency gains for airports and ground handling companies?
Sure. So thank you, Stan. First of all, I have a very bad habit of answering a question with another question, right? So, so your question was around e-freight and, one record and how these things are not picking up. Why, right? Let me ask you a question. How fast are, as we speak, how fast are we moving as Earth? It's about 1,000 miles per hour. How fast are we moving around the sun? About 60,000 miles an hour. Do we feel anything like that? No, right? Because it's a theory of relativity, right? So this industry, has been just moving. No one has just stepped out and seen whether you're moving in the right direction, whether you're moving at the right speed. And that is one of the reasons why when IATA conducted this whole survey 25 or 30 years back, the average time to move a shipment was 6.3 days, and 30 years later, it was 6.1 days. Nothing moved, right? Because we are all into it. We are all into the process. It's all about, doing the shores, managing the paperwork. In fact, as Glenn once said, the first air cargo shipment moved with just one document. And today we have 124 copies, right? So over a period of time, we have created more paperwork, right? So I think, Stan, let me first decode these 2-3 words that you spoke about, e-freight, right? I mean, it all started with e-airway bill. And as you rightly said, and Fred also kind of corroborated that, that this whole EDI started way back, right? But then there was this whole initiative around e-airway bill in the early 2000s. Everyone realized that just digitizing or creating an EDI equivalent of a paper document is not going to be sufficient. So around 2007 and 8, there was this whole initiative around e-freight. So you talk about, 12 or 19 documents and creating messages or EDI around that, right? So that was the effort around e-freight. And one record, which is the latest buzzword, it is all about, creating the data sharing standards and creating one shipment record for, all the stakeholders of the supply chain. So this is what it is, right? So we are moving from this whole messaging around a very narrow definition of just creating an EDI equivalent of a paper document to a common shipment record for the community. One of the reasons, as I said, why it is not moving is clearly this whole thing around the industry. I mean, and I take the blame. I take, as part of the service provider community, not having stepped back and seen, at what speed is all of this going, where all of this is going, and how can we change it? And that hasn't happened so far. But Stan, the good news is, as we speak now, a lot of airports and ports around the world have realized this need. As we speak, we are in touch with at least 40 plus airports and ports who have realized the need to, change this whole or create this whole digital infrastructure. And to answer your question around efficiency, well, it is a no-brainer, Stan. I mean, if the handlers know in advance how many trucks are coming, when, and what are they bringing, and who are the truck drivers, and they could, plan the resources, part of the congestion could be addressed, right? If the trucks for whom the cargo is not ready are still lining up at the airport and causing congestion, and you create a technology where they know that their cargo is not ready, so they need not go, right? If you give them visibility, they will not come. So I think the benefits, of the working together collaboratively, are there to see. You have benefits in terms of efficiency because you will reduce congestion. In the same capacity, you will handle more cargo. Your benefits around security, you'll get advanced shipment information. Your benefits around transparency and better customer service. So I think the technology is there, as Radhesh said, but the motivation and the awareness. We haven't created the awareness that we as Earth are moving at 1,000 miles per hour, right? So, although
then again, Amar, we have to look at something else too. The situation is we're going to be impacted by global warming. We're going to have environmental push, not pull. We're going to have to take that into account from now on. We have a situation now of disasters happening in the supply chain, which probably I'm just thinking about when we had the first PPE things and we had airplanes actually arriving in China because of crew issues turning around and leaving empty because they didn't know where the trucks were. Well, they would have if they had digitized things. So life's lessons are there. And for the three of you as providers, I just would like to see, and we'll get into it a little bit more, I'd like to see it that it's not selling a product that says, use our use our product because you'll be better if you're Swissport than WFS, or WFS you'll be better than Donata. That's what the point I'm trying to make is the core value of what you do is so important. Can we change the messaging? Now I'm going to throw this over to both Hendrik and Elliott with the following statement. We're looking at a situation now, particularly in the United States, where the airports are close to either closing and collapsing or putting embargoes. Why? Because cargo is sitting in warehouses and they can't process it anymore. Now, we can put the blame on lack of staff and everything else, but that's a whole nother story. But if we had a system which worked, the cargo that's coming in, we could bypass it through the warehouse, just like a rollerbed system, front door, back door, and out the door. But we can't. So we're now paying the penalty for not having taken up things like e-freight and cargo community systems. Elliott, Atlanta, JFK, and Los Angeles were in the news recently for congestion. So before I throw it to you and Swissport, because I'd like to hear your point of view. One, Swissport is one of the people who in Atlanta I hope anyway, are using the cargo community system you implemented. What has been the uptake? And before we get there, Hendrik, give us your point of view of these systems and what is the hindrance to taking a community approach in all this, realizing the government's drive towards environmental and economic sustainability targets?
No, my point of view is, and as an organization, we are incredibly supportive of airport community systems overall. We've connected to several systems already and where they are used properly, where the front-end applications are properly built and the usage is there, we really see quite a lot of advantages when it comes to an increase in data sharing between the different parties along the supply chain, from very operational apps and processes that can be really changed and transformed. So overall, we are a very big supporter of an airport community system approach. I usually see, across our network, two big hindrances in general. One is there's the entire technology element. I know a lot of us or a lot of companies in general still work on old legacy systems, right? So some of our IT architecture and IT technology is not so modern that we are able to quickly connect to just about any system. And this takes time, and this takes quite a bit of money, takes a lot of effort. And that's usually where you see delays occurring from the moment we start implementing some of these systems, as this is obviously quite critical to get right. So that usually is one big element. The second one is what I've seen, depending a bit on the airport and the approach that is chosen, and I want to commend Elliott there for the approach that Atlanta has chosen there. Well, you first need an airport community before you can implement any system, right? That's where it starts. If your community isn't pulled together, if you don't decide upon which initiative has priority on how to approach, which supplier to award, how are you going to work together as a community, it is incredibly difficult to implement any joint system in that sense. And that's usually where we see a bit of different approaches where no, one works better than the other. And you see successes and failures mostly because of this.
Well, then I have to challenge you on something. And then I'll revert it to Elliott now. Elliott, you've had that objective of bringing the cargo community system to Atlanta. Now you were the first in the United States. It's not new in Amsterdam, for example. It's not new in other major gateways, but it is new to the United States and Canada. The companies, however, that you deal with are global. They're global airlines in most cases. I mean, of course, Delta is your home carrier, but I mean, Koreans there and NCA's there and Airbridge is there. So you're dealing with global companies. You're dealing with global handling companies as well. What's holding back stakeholder pickup of a cargo community system, if that is a problem in Atlanta? What are the growing pains that you've had to go through? That's number one. And the second thing is, certainly you're talking where we don't have privilege to do that, but you're talking to people in TSA and Customs and Border Protection and everything else. What's their viewpoint on this? Do they want it, and are they going to engage as well?
Let me go backwards from your last question. The federal agencies, I think those who, most of all, they don't understand it. And once they hear that it's about technology, they're concerned about security. They're concerned about infiltration into federal systems. And we know that recently we've been having a lot of cyber hacks into a variety of not just private sector, but also government installations. And it's a big problem for us right now. So they're concerned that these technology may create backdoors into federal systems, into sensitive data. So that's something that the technology companies, the Kale and so forth, have to somehow send the message that these things are safe, that there are no backdoors being created, that the technology is stored and the servers are in the US. And I know Amar always says that when he's talking about the ACS system. So that's the first thing. There needs to be some education for the federal components that it is safe. It's not a backdoor into cybersecurity issues. The second thing is the point that Hendrik raised, that companies have legacy systems that they figure, hey, if it's working now, why should we change it? And they think that there's going to be this big overhaul of their system. It's going to be expensive, and that they won't understand it. And for many, especially in the US, because it's so new. And so there is obviously an education needed there to help them to understand that, one, it's not going to change their system tremendously, if at all. But two, it will help them to be more efficient and to save costs. In our case in Atlanta, one of the reasons we signed up for this, because we can't grow anymore. We're land constrained. We may build another cargo facility on 53 acres, which is one of our big cargo projects that's in stream right now. But after that, we're stuck for another, I don't know how many years. We have communities all around us. So we can't expand. And if we can expand, it means we have to be more efficient. We have to be faster. And a lot of it comes from how we are in passenger. We're the world's busiest and most efficient airport. Well, we also want to be the most efficient in cargo as well. There's no reason why we should have cargo sitting in a warehouse on the airport for a day, 2 days, 3 days. There's no reason for that, not with the technology that we have. The other thing that boggles my mind is that, and I'm not as old as maybe you and Fred, Stan, but
Fred, are you going to take that?
Not yet.
Although I may look it. But we have been talking, even since the earlier part of my career in the trade policy era, we've been talking about one-stop window and Asikuda systems and streamlining trade. I worked on the trade facilitation negotiations. And the thing is, every country that is a net importer of goods is concerned about adapting technology where they feel they cannot control trade. The reason being because trade, I mean, we talk about it here as very, it's our field, but trade is very political, it's very nationalistic. And when a country, when politicians talk about trade, they don't talk about services, they talk about goods moving across borders. And that's what we do, we move goods. So countries that are net importers of goods are always concerned about creating too much transparency, because the technologies like these create transparency. It takes away the control from the bureaucracy and allows the system to work more efficiently. And sometimes they don't want that because they want to control it. They want to control, feel like they're controlling trade. But I think it's a losing battle because today I can go on my phone and I can order anything from Amazon or Alibaba or anyone, and I expect instant gratification because of this technology. And the technology that we're talking about, cargo community systems and so forth, those systems contribute to that instant gratification. Consumers today expect instant gratification. And if we in the logistics industry don't get our act together and start using the same technology that consumers are using, we're going to lose out. We're going to lose out to those like the Alibabas and the Amazons who are using that technology, who do recognize the psychology of consumers today, that they want instant gratification. So,
last week I was talking to the former CEO of one of the major e-commerce involved companies, and he said that he had a meeting with the head of Alibaba, Jack Ma, and his team. And he in the discussion, he turned around and he said to him, "What's your core business?" And he said the answer shocked him. He turned around and he said, "Our first core business is we pay, because then we control the money. And the second core business we have is our data systems, because if we control the data and we control the money, the rest of what we do with moving goods around is just ancillary services to provide that." I can easily see that that's the same business case for Amazon. Now, what that scares me is if that's their mentality, what's that going to do to the scheduled airlines of the world and in their ability to handle and process products other than on an airplane, which those two will control? So we have to look at it as an industry. So I'm going to go back and make one statement. If I had my three wishes, one of them would be that Champ and IBS and Kale Logistics sat down and said, how can we, now that we've learned this, what Elliott just told us, unified way go to these governments? Because one of the things that FedEx said in a recent ICO conference that I was, not conference, it was an internal web discussion, they said was the only thing holding back a complete 100% digitization is that governments don't trust the data yet.
Yeah.
And we are working on it as ICO and in the UN, and I'm not them, but I am on some of those committees. But that might take a couple of years. And in the meantime, it would be great if you took away from what was just said by Elliott as a mission statement between you, and not sell a unique selling point and use that as your sales, but also getting these governments would help everybody. Now, Hendrik, hearing what Elliott just said, you said you have, everybody says the same thing. You have antiquated, in some cases, technology. But what about the fact that your airline customers, are you doing any marketing to your airline customers to say, look, we can handle your cargo faster. We can give you a better product if you, instead of just making us and insisting we use your proprietary IT system, you would embark on something like a common platform. Are you doing that, which would help the whole industry?
We are. We're actually very active in this space. Now, one of I would say the transformation we've been going through internally, with plenty more to come, is to really provide a lot more digital services, not only to our airline customers, but to the community as a whole. Just as an example, we've implemented self-service kiosks in quite a few operations across the globe already, with a pilot coming to the US in the next few months, where we basically push a lot of the workload on our side at the front counter to a self-service kiosk, with a lot of data checks already having happened in advance. The big advantage of this is that we have less congestion at the counters, but on the other hand, the truck drivers need to wait a lot less as well. So this is really something that benefits everyone. And on top of that, we collect a lot more data that benefits the entire community. So this is one of the things that we've actively been doing in the last 18 months, pushing this message out, not only to airline customers, but to the entire airport communities that we serve in the end. And this is one of the many steps we're taking. We're now deploying a new Android mobile app across the warehouses, by which as well we are starting to collect a lot more data about our processes, by which the next step is then to expose a lot of that data to airport communities and to airlines in general. Now, I actually fully agree with the statement of Jack there of Alibaba that you just mentioned. The winners out of the entire COVID crisis are the ones that manage their data properly. Anyone can load or unload a truck. No, that does not require the best tools, the most modern infrastructure, etc. It's the players that focus on data, that focus on transparency, and in the end, therefore, provide the best service that will come out of this as a winner. Now, and next to that, what I find incredibly baffling is that if you look at our industry in general, we are able to do the most fantastic things together. I mean, look at the entire COVID crisis and look at the supply chains that were started for medical equipment, vaccines in a matter of a few weeks and months. All of us pulled together and are able to pull that off. I mean, the introduction of those passenger freighter combinations. I mean, we work together with Elliott and the team in Atlanta for this. Regulators jump on board, handling agents between us, forwarders, airlines, etc. In a matter of a few weeks, we adjust anything that is needed to get things done. However, when it comes to FWBs, I think it was Fred who mentioned earlier, the first talks about this was the 1980s, maybe even before I was born. Today, year to date, Swissport has received 68% of FWBs for all the shipments we process. I mean, 1 in 3 is missing. It's just absolutely baffling that we need to employ people to sit behind the desk to type in data that has been typed in upstream 4 times before already. We should be better as an industry, very clear.
Well, Fred, Radhesh, and Amar, this is all fine, but it ain't happening, guys. I mean, I chastised the press a couple of weeks ago. All I see in the press these days is new systems to get between the forwarder and the airline, like how to sell and put a price in the marketplace. I don't think that's important, because the last thing we need is another intermediary between the actual shipper, the forwarder, and the airline. But anyway, that's all I see in the press. I rarely see Champ or IBS or Kale Logistics saying, look, or maybe I'm missing it, so blame me afterwards. But I don't hear from Champ or IBS or Kale Logistics that, look, we can help the economy, we can help the environment. We can help the airports to be more viable. We can do more with less with the Swissport facility if you embark on this. Why aren't you promoting the efficiency and the security angles and also putting the message out that the governments are telling you what they want, rather than commercializing this? Can't we distance commercialization, where you're creating your own unique selling points as service providers, into let's say 50% of it is for the good of the whole industry and 50% is you're selling your products based on unique selling points? Fred, what's wrong with my approach? Am I being naive?
No. I think you're absolutely right. I think, from we have a commercial outlook, of course, when we develop services, but I think also, having seen the initiatives that take place in the industry and listening to our customers, we create products and we say, here's a solution for e-freight, for example, or here's a solution to give to your forwarders to enter the data one time, and then it just flows upstream. So then it becomes a matter of adoption. So I think from the perspective of, do we provide the services that are needed? I would say yes. I think maybe to add to that, or to your point, how do we take a different approach, not selling a product, but how do we do this to send a message that we're advancing the industry? We try to do that by attending conferences, panels such as this one. But you made another point about, that the companies, the providers should maybe get together once in a while and just have discussions on their own and examine the industry and see what we can do together, because, we all provide systems, good systems, and but I still think, data sharing is such a big part of it. And, it's not that we intentionally close our systems up, but again, I think we can do a lot more as vendors to promote these initiatives in the industry.
I'm going to go one step further and tell you that I'm going to hold the three of you to account publicly. And maybe that's a tough thing to say, and maybe you'll say his opinion doesn't count anyway. But I think you have a social and economic responsibility that is on your shoulders, and maybe you're not aware of it. And I'm going to challenge you in a moment, Elliott, on something as well. You have an obligation now, because the governments are going to dictate it, but before they dictate it, to get together. Radhesh, Amar, what's your opinion on this?
Okay, I think one thing I fully agree with you, Stan, is that maybe this sort of thing is not marketed very well. I mean, as you rightly said, the sheen on, the shine of whatever that you get to see in PRs and things like that, largely related to things like online platforms, booking. I can get a quote now and things like that. And these things
quite
sort
honestly,
of take
Radhesh, let me just interrupt. I give a damn about that, because all I think that is smoke and mirrors. When I talk about environmental and the economy and survival of companies, I think that has more importance, right?
Absolutely. That's my point. So I think that's where probably more work needs to be done. If you look at how we make value proposition to any of our customers, this figures very high in that conversation. When we talk about systems where we say, how can we reduce waste? How can we digitize the product? It's such an abused term, but still I use it. But how do we actually bring the value in these things? And this is it's not something we have invented. We have developed it with many of our customers. It's in production. We know it works. And to some of the things that Hendrik actually said, like, walk into a terminal, you don't have to go stand in queue. You've got self-service terminals, just like you have in baggage drop-off points and things like that. These things exist. And this is very much part of our value proposition when we talk to customers. But I fully agree with you, Stan. Maybe this needs to be talked about more and out there a bit more in terms of saying, what should we aspire to be, and what should we as an industry try to do together and things like that. Another thing, I think, to just maybe put a little bit of words to what you said earlier. I mean, how do we get to a stage where we become a digital ecosystem? Not just about individual suppliers being able to do this and that, but how do we collaborate? We are also making steps in that direction. For example, we do work with other companies. For example, I had a recent discussion with a company that does a lot of work in solving one big problem, which is dimensions capture. And they've got this technology which automates that and takes off a huge burden in terms of manual effort and time at the terminals. So these are things where I think we can get to a point where you're not talking about systems which just do what they're supposed to do in isolation, but systems that are able to do together and do more together. I think in these things, I think there should be more focus, and the message should be out there so that people can appreciate what's going on and also be inspired to do similar kind of things in their own shed.
Amar?
Yeah.
And I was first going to say, you're not reading the right press, when you said that. But then I have to take the blame. You're absolutely right, Stan. Maybe it's not that you're not reading the right press. It's just that what we are talking, I mean, the language that we are speaking is not something that the industry understands, and we have to fine tune the language. And I completely agree with what Radhesh said. And on this call, right, we have Fred. So we are a partner of Champ. I mean, in some capacity, we do collaborate, we work with each other, but those are purely transaction-based collaborations. I mean, we partner for a particular purpose, but what we can do together as an industry, I mean, Champ has a huge customer base. Can we leverage that partnership, elsewhere, do something more so that the ecosystem benefits? Radhesh mentioned about this beautiful company which does dimensioning. We work with other companies in IoT space where, they're doing temperature tracking, and, that provides tremendous value to the exporters who are part of our platform, right? But I think we probably need, and there was an effort that, one of the associations has done where we need an ecosystem where, and it's difficult, Stan, with antitrust and, all of those things. It's very difficult to sit on the same table and, talk about, how can we create that digital ecosystem for the whole industry. Having said that, it's a responsibility. We have some existing relationships that we need to leverage and take further. And, if not a global forum like this, but at least in individual capacities, we should work with other partner companies. I mean, come on, in community platforms, we preach collaboration. And if we don't collaborate with our, competitors or other suppliers, then we're not taken seriously, right?
Yeah, let me challenge you, and you can comment on this one quickly. I mean, because you work with the UN, right? I mean, we said that when we introduced you. That's one issue. But what I'm talking about here is how do we get like I think it was FedEx on a call we had a couple of weeks ago talking about Department of Homeland Security concern about the security of data. We're talking here about how do we get governments to trust what you guys do? Now, certainly there's no antitrust involved there, okay? Because common sense says that if they tell you we need this to feel secure and you go back in your own shop and do it, there's no antitrust here. So let's focus on the issue that we're talking about, which is environmental and economic sustainability. And the efficiencies of your systems can bring that about. So all I'm asking and pontificating here a bit about is shame on you if you don't realize the value of what you're doing in this industry, because it is paramount in us getting back on our feet. Now, I'm going to push this to Elliott now and a bit to Hendrik. Hendrik, you scared me a bit. And let me tell you why. You mentioned you're introducing systems which do, in effect, in a proprietary way, what the cargo community system can help with, which is, decongesting, less pollution, trucks having a truck slot booking, whatever it may be, right? And the airport needs data themselves in order to plan infrastructure, to be able to communicate effectively with government authorities and do their own planning, et cetera, et cetera. That's not going to come from a proprietary system, right? It's only going to come from a community system. And the only way we're going to have a community system is if Swissport around the world agrees to join a community system and put aside their own proprietary sales tool to compete against WFS and Donata or whoever else. Now, I know this is a fact. I have seen where, less so in Asia, less so in the Gulf, because there are preferred government-owned or controlled entities. But I've seen where GHAs will actually actively dissuade people from joining a cargo community system. Now, Elliott, question to you is, based on the fact that you have the best insight as an airport authority with the TSA and the CBSA, and I imagine in Amsterdam with the Dutch government or in Belgium, etc. It's the airports who have the ear of the governments when it comes to safety and security because they're looking to you to implement it. Should airports mandate this? And that's a tough word, but in my opinion, they should, okay? Why? We have to take the commercialization out of something which is for the common good of all the economic stakeholders involved in air logistics. And also, again, back to my pet theme, we need economic and environmental sustainability. So should airports, I'm not asking you to speak for Atlanta because that would be unfair. I'm saying when this is all said and done and we meet in Rome next year together, hopefully face to face, we can say, yeah, you know, ICAO and the UN now are saying, and the US government and the Dutch government and the Belgian government and the UAE is saying, now this is mandatory, we need it. What's your opinion on that? Speaking as Elliott, Paige, with all your international experience, I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of Atlanta.
I would say yes, Stan. I think if I could do it over again, if I did it someplace else, I would make it mandatory. Because I heard what Hendrik said, and you're very right. The Swissport is creating a proprietary system, but at the same time saying they're not joining a community system because it's not community enough. And it's not just Swissport saying that, many others are saying that. But if the airport says that anyone who operates on the airport has to use a cargo community system and it's mandatory, then it's a different ball game. And we can do that. We have the authority to do that. We can put it in our lease. We can make sure that everyone signs up. We can do that. In Atlanta's case, we didn't do that for various reasons, but I think it's the best approach because what you'll have is a hodgepodge of some companies recognizing the savings that they're making. And in Atlanta's case, we talked to many of our trucking companies, the freight forwarding companies, and they can show on a spreadsheet the savings that they're making in both time and money and the efficiencies that the system has created for them. At the same time, across the street, you have companies that are using legacy systems and they don't really care about the savings because they're making money. They're not going under, they're not going in the red. If it ain't broken, why change it? Is the kind of the attitude. And so you have these two. Eventually, one will lose out, but for the time being, while cargo is making money, it's high in demand, the rates are pretty high. They're not changing their old ways. So it's up to airports who want to be efficient, who are space constrained, who recognize that they're serving a community that demands faster, speedier, higher quality service to kind of make that mandatory. So I perfectly agree with you.
Okay, then I'll go back to you, Hendrik. I've got to say that, when cars were first invented, we didn't need a driver's license, but eventually the government said you need a driver's license. So before the government says, because of environmental, cybersecurity, and everything else, that we want your system to be protected through this, why aren't you in the cargo community system in Atlanta? Hendrik?
Stan, can I just correct this? Hendrik, Swissport is part of the cargo community.
Oh, well, then I misunderstood Elliott. So my apologies. Hendrik, you're a great guy. I apologize. All right. So that being said, all right, and I hope everybody agrees, I'd like to ask a few very specific questions, maybe to a few members of the panel. That was a great discussion, and I hope you don't mind me challenging you like I did. But I'm very passionate about this because, maybe like I always tell my friends, before I embark on my second career as fertilizer, I'm going to do something to get something implemented. And this is one of the pets that I have is digitization. And I truly support ICAO's initiative on this. Hendrik, automation within the warehouse can also be tied to these systems, right? and automation in the warehouse, because we do a lot of airport design and facility design. I've seen things like the cargo community system, or even your customers being able to tell the machine, I'm coming, and the system tells them, okay, come to dock number 20 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the machine brings the cargo actually to the dock. I mean, and then you only need one person with a forklift, or you need 10 people because you got 1,000 boxes to load. What's new and innovative in this drive towards linking the automation in the warehouse to the community? And why I'm asking that is because we're moving away from build-up pallets towards individual small shipments. So I think congestion is only going to get worse unless we do something. What's happening in that field? What's new and innovative there that you could possibly share with us? Because I know Swissport is, from what I heard anyways, in leading edge in testing these things.
Indeed, and happily invite you to one of our next pilot stands so you can come over and have a look. No, there's obviously a variety of initiatives ongoing, and what it usually comes down to for us is assessing how mature a certain technology is so that we can launch into a pilot mode. The interesting thing about that, when looking at warehouse automation in general, is that we, and airports in general, actually, we tend to work in a very closed circuit. It's not like we're having self-driving cars on a public road that need to intervene with a lot of different other parties. It's really kind of a closed circuit, which is actually the perfect playground for us to do a lot of this innovative stuff. One of the pilots we now have planned in November, so over the coming weeks, is an automated guided vehicle that will transport pallets and containers automatically through our warehouse. So we'll drive a certain trajectory through the warehouse, and it uses a mobile app that is being deployed on the devices of our workers by which they can call upon this specific vehicle. It's a very simple pilot. We're going to try this out. We're going to see how it works together with the supplier. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot of this, both on our side as on their side, and then hopefully take the next steps over the coming months to evaluate a further rollout across the network. We're actually looking at the same for very repetitive warehouse tasks with forklifts. We've looked at visual guided vehicles already before. There's still a few issues in the maturity of the technology, driving up and down slopes, trying to lift pallets up, as in the end, it all needs to be safe for our staff to work with. But what I find actually interesting so far is that maturity of technology is one element, but usually is not the biggest showstopper. It is the change management you need to go through when you make the match between technology and the people in your warehouse that really drives the biggest change. And that's also very interesting in these pilots. I always tend to have a clean eye out for the psychological aspects of this. What does this do to the people? There's technology coming in. How do they deal with that, etc.? So quite a bit happening in that space.
Good. Elliott, I have a quick question for you related to that. In developing this new facility you just discussed, what we're talking about really, Hendrik, correct me if I'm wrong, is sort of a machine cargo interface, right? And guided by technology. And I see a lot of efficiency gains there on the airport. Is that something that you would really want a developer, or if you develop the building yourself, to sort of give it as a mandate that they put these systems in, bearing in mind they're not cheap? So efficiency gains have to pay for the investment, I suppose. Is this something you'd be willing as an airport to insist that a developer provides on the airport in order to make the airport more attractive and more marketable?
No, simple answer is yes. We have put in our RFPs that we want the companies to have, automated vehicular systems, as much automation as possible. We are cognizant that it can be too expensive because it's so new, and so we do ask them to balance the cost of implementing this new technology versus the benefits of it, because we still want to remain competitive. Mm-hmm. We want to have the latest gadgets, but we still want to be competitive. So we have to find the right balance. Yeah.
And if I may add to that, I think for us as ground handling agents, at a certain moment, implementing this type of technology will become a necessity. If you indeed look at the current situation with labor shortages everywhere at this moment in time, there is no other choice but to use technology to our advantage. Not only for us, this goes for a lot of parties in the supply chain.
Absolutely. Elliott, any advice for airports that might be listening now that are considering the approach that you just mentioned? I mean, there's a couple of things I've heard today that are really good, and I hope we do it. One of them, obviously, is your mentioning of asking developers and GHAs to prove to you that they're going to become a marketing tool, and automation and digitization are two aspects of that. And what about the need for these systems for infrastructure planning and deciding, for example, how roads should operate so there's no congestion? You can only do that with data, right? Any advice for airports that might be embarking on new developments of how they should sort of collaborate with people like Amar and Radhesh and Fred to give you a better understanding of what you're going to insist on?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, it's the data that's collected from this is vital for us because we can know how many trucks are coming. Right now, we know basically how many trucks on average are coming. And then with enough data we can now predict how many trucks are likely to come during a specific period. That's important for us because we're surrounded by interstate highways and we need to keep these as clear as possible. It's not just enough to have enough parking for aircrafts and stuff. It's important for us to have clear highways, clear roadways to allow the trucks to come in, the right lanes, the right turning points for trucks turning in a particular direction without eating up the curb. So we work very closely with our Georgia Department of Transportation on developing highways and road infrastructure around the region. We're always in conversations with our local governments about truck traffic. We know that politically, voters don't like trucks on their roads because trucks are big and scary, but they also bring you your goods that you order and provide next day delivery or same day delivery. So there's this need for educating the people that make the decisions about the importance of cargo generally and the importance of making sure that the infrastructure is right to create efficiency. So it's great to have the technology, but it's also important to have the infrastructure so that the trucks can get in and out easily.
Well, one last question for you, Elliott, before we move on is you talked to TSA, you talked to Customs and Border Protection, I'm sure in Holland and Belgium and UAE, et cetera, who are very progressive in logistics because it's important and vital for their economy. Are there any messages coming down to you from these government authorities as the direction they'd like you to take?
I think they'd like to see us do a couple of things. One of the advantages of systems like cargo community systems is that it's not just creating efficiencies in your airport, in your community, but if you can connect to another cargo community system in another country, in another city, then you're creating kind of doubling that efficiency. So, I always envision if I'm connected to Schiphol, if Atlanta is connected to Schiphol, we can know what's coming on an aircraft from the time it's booked in Schiphol and throughout the cycle, the life cycle until it gets to Atlanta. And that sort of knowledge helps us to create the resources here necessary for that. Over time, collecting all of that data, because you're right, the key to success in the future is understanding the data, collecting the data and understanding it, understanding how cargo flows, how trucks move to pick up cargo, how staff work efficiently, and how we optimize warehouses. And the beauty about these things is that we can collect data throughout the supply chain to be more efficient, to learn over time. And because these systems are using artificial intelligence that learn the behavior of each component, each element, then artificially, it's also able to help us improve over time. It's able to tell trucks, you know, a shorter route to get to the airport to avoid traffic. It's able to tell a forklift driver where he should put a particular pallet because it's going to be delivered sooner rather than later. It's able to kind of take the stupid out of human interactions and help us to be more efficient. It's enhancing us. So, you know, and this is what we're hearing from a lot of European partners. They would like us to do some of these things so that we have the same standards.
Super. That's great to hear. And obviously push is the most painful way of change, meaning if the governments and the rest come and dictate, patchwork solutions might result, but the economic benefit and the environmental benefits won't be there because we haven't been prepared. Then I go into Radhesh, Amar, and Fred. You got great individual systems. There's nothing I've seen from any of you that makes me doubt what you have is not great. But could you quickly just give us, because we're running out of time, and every time we have such a great panel, I know we're going to take longer than we're supposed to, but it's well worthwhile. Can you give us an opinion what big sore point for me is each airline wanting you to, especially a GHA like Swissport, to work with their system. Are you doing anything as a group to pick up and sort of get airlines to understand, get forwarders to understand that it's in their good to use these systems? Are you, other than advertising, is there any way you could lobby this for airlines and forwarders so that people like Swissport, people like trucking companies, people like airports wouldn't have such a tough sell? Is there any way you could tell me as providers of what I consider a critical component for the future, that you're able to start that activity, or maybe even put it in your advertising from now on instead of talking about, you know, use our system and we can get you a cheaper rate with this airline X or airline Y in the press? I'd love to see something coming from you guys that would say, use us and your environmental footprint will improve and your economic sustainability in your community will improve. That's what I'd like to see from now on. So what can you tell me, Fred, maybe starting with you?
I think it's a difficult topic, and the reason is that, you know, we provide a service, and we do it to the satisfaction, best of our ability, to the satisfaction of that client. The one benefit is that many of the ground handlers that are using our service, airlines also use the same application. So from that respect, it's at least solving some of the training problems within the ground handler. But I think you also mentioned at the beginning where, you know, there's a tendency for people to hang on to information, or there's a mistrust that this entity is not going to bring the right information into the other company's system. Technically, it's all there. I mean, you know, we interchange so well between these systems, especially our own one entity to another. It's very easy to do. So I think it's a matter of trust. How do we as a vendor convince them to try to use the same application? I think maybe, you know, you brought up a point, maybe it's coming up with some mutual benefit to them that makes it more affordable, or somewhat, there has to be a benefit, right? We have to get past this idea of it's not my system that you need to put the data into my system directly rather than transmitting it. So if we can figure out a way to do that, then yes, we might be able to have those conversations. But I think right now it's kind of difficult to convince them to do that.
And I mean, if I may add, need to take part of the blame there. Me along with your customer base in general, all across the board. I know in the end, you are a service provider that delivers what its customers want. If I am unhappy with what I'm buying with any service, whether I rent a car, book a hotel, or pay for my phone subscription, if I'm not happy, I should change. or I should challenge the provider that I'm with. And in the end, I think this is as well down to the customer's behavior one way or another. I know if Amar would approach me with one of the many fantastic products he has, our behavior tends to be as well. The first question we ask is, how much does it cost? Not how much value will you bring to me? And that is part of the focus that is so embedded in the DNA of our industry that I think as well we need to get out of. And I see a lot of nods here in the panel session. But I think we indeed need to get out of that and start creating value instead of saving cost.
Fantastic. I know we're running out of time, and I know some people have to drop off. So I'm gonna first of all thank you. I mean, this has been fantastic, and I hate being the guy who stirs the pot here, but I really want you guys to succeed, and the only way that's going to happen is if we accept change. So Hendrik, before you go away,
don't lie, Stan. You love stirring the pot.
I think somebody who works for me, Lillian Tan, said once to a whole training class we were running, one thing about Stan, you're going to get what he thinks, not what is politically correct, right? So maybe that's age, maybe that allows me to do it. And there's a graph I like very much. There's age, and I'll say it this way: give a damn. That's not exactly what the graph says. And the older you get, the less you give a damn. That's what it's all about. But anyway, look, before you go away, Hendrik, having listened and thought about the key points that we've just talked about, right? From a GHA point of view, right? What would you like to see happen between now and next year in Rome, when we're going to host you over there for a drink and I'm going to pay for it? What 3 points would you like to see? What can we ask you to send us an email and say we can pin it up on the board at the end of this conference along with everyone else's? In other words, you got a clean shade. You could say that you want Elliott to build that building tomorrow. I don't care what it is. Clean slate. What 3 things would you like to see happen in the next 12 months?
I think, indeed, one element we haven't touched upon today yet is people. It is by far the most important element or aspect in any of our businesses. What makes a fantastic cargo handling business is not the technology we use, not the facility we're in, but it's the people that run it. We see it each and every day. And it's as well a commitment I want to make. We need to focus a lot more on our people, not only when it comes to investing in their leadership skills and all the soft skills, but really as well in the people themselves. We've been doing quite a few salary increases as well in the last year, and this we need to keep up. It's a massive focus area for all of us, I believe. Without investing in our people, we're not going to get anywhere as an industry. For me, number 2 would be a technology leap. And I call it technology and not only digitization, because the entire warehouse infrastructure is another element to technology in general. I don't think that fidgeting around in the margins of getting a few more e-area bills will do it for us. We really need to think outside of the box and make drastic changes. Now, we touched on the legacy systems, that being one, but there's drastic changes needed in our industry. If you look at where technology is on average, the maturity of a lot of technology and where we are as an industry, there's quite a bit of catch up to do. And I think that's the understatement of the session here. So, those are 2 incredibly important elements already. And for me, number 3 would be to shift our focus to the end customers' needs. If you see what some of the e-commerce companies are doing these days, 72-hour delivery times across the globe, etc. We shouldn't take days or weeks to transport a shipment from one end to the globe to another. We, in the end, will need to go through an entire transformation as an industry to deliver what the end customer wants, and not only what one individual party in the chain needs or wants. So to me, those would be the 3 elements.
Thanks. If I could ask you to send us an email with that, we would like to hold you account for that, or you're not getting your drink.
Happily do so.
Yeah, sorry. So Stan,
what 3 points?
So clearly, Stan, number 1, collaboration. Collaboration not just amongst the community, but even amongst the service providers that we discussed. Number 2, harmonization, because number 3 on my list clearly is digitization. But digitization won't happen without harmonization of standards. If each party starts creating its own standards for, and we have this problem at an industry level, even, World Customs Organization, at United Nations, we're all deliberating and working on creating harmonized standards. Because Hendrik, I don't know, 90 countries, Hendrik, Swissport will be operating, and then you have to, comply to processes, customs, regulations to 90 countries. And unless we have that harmonization, digitization, the pace of digitization is not going to be what it can be. So these three things, and I promise you, Stan, I'm working even at the United Nations on this. So harmonization, digitization, and collaboration, these are three things. And you will see, and I don't drink, so you don't have to buy me a drink.
Hey, you're a cheap date.
but you will see significant progress in next 1 year. I promise you that.
Okay, Radhesh.
Stan, I probably will pick up on one thing you probably threw a bit of a direction on. For me, it was also something that I realized during this session. I think this particular thing, the messaging around what we discussed about the larger benefits of this thing, I think I agree with you, is undermarketed. And this probably is one thing I will definitely take a note of to improve that, to get the message out there, not just about all the other stuff that we talk about, and gets more, I would say, interest in the community. I think this is certainly something we can improve on. Second would be, I think, the whole idea of how we can improve this whole concept, or how we can progress towards that digital ecosystem concept. We are making steps in that direction, but I'm sure we can do more, and we can certainly do more together in that respect. And the third thing would be, if you were to really measure success to say, have you created something? I mean, I think I'll speak for everyone here. Have we created something that gets rid of paper completely in at least one of your processes? And it's not just about getting rid of airway, that's just one step. Can you get rid of paper, for example, from your internal processes? I mean, I've been to so many warehouses where you go to one particular wall, you'll see a whole sticker board of things that people stick on walls or whatever they can find place on to talk about passing on instructions. The leading hand sticks up a paper somewhere for the guy who's building up the cargo. Can we put this to ourselves to say, we will come up with something where get rid of paper completely in one flow? I think these are the three things in my mind, which I would love to see when probably we meet up next.
Okay, before we move
I
to
would
Fred,
certainly pick you up on the offer of beer, probably, Stan.
But I got to give you a challenge then. One of the things I keep hearing about is the automation and complete paperless of dangerous goods handling. Think of that. Mm-hmm. Fred.
Right, so three things. I think digitization, of course, is in my mind one of the most important things. And it's not just digitization of, I mean, it's a broad term, but I think we need to find ways to share information more, okay? We're three vendors here on this panel, but there are others, and there are other companies providing many other different services that are all part of this. But we're all kind of in little pockets, and not one company is going to create all the products. So, we have to work together, and not necessarily sitting down in meetings, but at least being able to open our systems up in such a way that not just sharing data, but even functionality. We do that today with APIs, and they exist, and I'm sure, I mean, that's just part of modern programming. And it's quite easy for another company to use those APIs. So for me, I think it would be really good if more of us were to somehow expose those APIs, and maybe that's something we could talk about in Rome, or even show where we're collaborating, such as we're doing things with even hardware, a scale machine that is able to weigh some goods, do the dimensions, and upload that through an API into the system. Okay, but there's a lot more that could be done like that. Even maybe to launch the robots. I don't know. And the second thing I think is innovation. If again, thinking out of the box. There's a lot of things that we can think about to do things in ways that haven't been thought about. Okay, I mean, even doing pilots such as things with Google Glass, where the information is given to the person in the warehouse instead of looking at a phone or a tablet. There's other ways to communicate that information to them. IoT, of course, is another great area in innovation, and I think it's got a long way to go. It's somewhat untapped. Number 3, I think, is the collaboration that Amar mentioned. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with many of the other things. So, if we champ invent something that Amar can use, then let's, talk about that, and vice versa. But also it comes, it also plays into the regulatory aspect, the mandates, okay? I'm okay with mandates. I think they kickstart different companies to actually get certain things done. But at the same time, people don't necessarily want to be told how to do something. So part of collaboration as well, so that we all have some voice in this and we agree with it, then, then it works quite well.
And last but not least, Elliott, as a beneficiary of a lot of this, because it would make the airports around the world more marketable and more user-friendly, shall we say, but also more economically and environmentally sustainable. What 3 things would you like to see from this group, or from by the way, one thing, Hendrik, there is a whole panel on people, and I think you'll enjoy it, because it was quite a good one. So be sure to tune in for that. Elliott, 3 things quickly.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of what everyone's saying. Yes, digitization, but digitization and mechanization and blending those 2 together. I would love to see a discussion in Rome about how we implement not just community systems, but link them with the mechanization and have IoT, Internet of Things, that are automatically collecting data and providing that to the stakeholders that need it. And doing it in an efficient way. So that's kind of the one discussion. That would be my number 1. My number 2 is similar to Hendrik's, training. I think that we neglect a lot of the human element of cargo, and training of the people that are actually moving goods. We talk a lot about, as airports, we want to have high value specialized cargo and live animals and very, very, and pharmaceutical products and so forth. And, if we've worked, any one of us who've worked on an airport knows that we've had some disasters with live animals, with pharmaceuticals, because of lack of training, lack of the people understanding what they're working with. And, no amount of technology can help that. We still need that human element. And so that's my number 2. And my number 3 is kind of related to that, is the condition of work. One of my, a ground handler was telling me the other day that in the winter, they hire a lot of extra staff because in the summer, the warehouse and the tarmac gets so hot that they lose a lot of staff. People get a job, and within 45 minutes, they quit, because it's the conditions to work on the ramp and so forth are just outrageous. And I think that we have the technology today to retrofit our warehouses, to have air-conditioned tugs or air-conditioned equipment, whatever it is, to make staff more comfortable. And I love what Hendrik said. Related to that condition of work is, of course, a living wage, paying people a living wage. In my airport situation, sometimes we have what we call working homeless. We have people who have 2 jobs because they're 2 minimum wage jobs, and they have to sleep on the airport because there's 3 hours from one job to the next, and it takes them an hour to get home. So they might as well sleep somewhere in the airport until the next job. If we pay people a salary where they can afford to live, they don't need to live like that. We won't have such a fast turnover. It wouldn't cost us as much to train people over and over again. We wouldn't have so many safety issues. We would have more efficiencies if we treat our labor, our people better. And, you know, that's my number 3.
Okay, well, I'm gonna make 2 points there. That one other thing I would say if I was an airport is you should have some say over what these GHAs are paying people, number one. And the second thing is I think we should start a training course. And that training course would be for the CEOs and CFOs in the boardrooms, in the C-suites of airlines, ground handling companies, and airports, that cargo really is a core business. And you better start thinking about that if you want your airport or your airline or your ground handling company to be to survive, because we cannot continue on the way we are. Our breakfast is going to be eaten by our competitors if we don't do this. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having this conversation. I'm sorry if I've been a pain in the you-know-what in challenging you like I did, but you know, knowing me, you know what you're getting into. So I know you all hopefully took something away from this, as well as what our audience will take away. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day or evening for some of you. And on behalf of the audience, I really appreciate your candor, your expertise, your experience, and what you've been able to share today. Thank you very much.